So three of the areas we've been and continue to work on are a bit more complex, and I'd like to take a few minutes of my time to give a bit more details on them. They are military religious intolerance, the faith-based initiative scheme that I mentioned for a moment, and vouchers to religious education. I have heard from veterans who served before the extreme religious right obtained a stranglehold on positions of power in the Pentagon and our military throughout the world. They are appalled at the atmosphere of proselytizing and harassment of non-Christians, as well as of Christians who are not identified as born again in today's military. In 2006, the House of Representatives actually passed an amendment to the Department of Defense Appropriations Bill, which would have explicitly allowed military chaplains to proselytize unwilling soldiers. The Secular Coalition works across party lines, and I am proud to report that it was a Republican Senator Warner from Virginia, Senator John Warner, who was the driving force behind quashing that amendment. More recently, a soldier in Iraq, Jeremy Hall, was threatened with punishment when attempting to hold an approved free thought meeting after being challenged for identifying as an atheist when asked why he wasn't praying over Thanksgiving dinner. When Hall finally sued to protect his right to hold meetings similar to those held for religious soldiers, he was treated so badly that he expressed fear for his life, not from the admitted dangers of serving in Iraq, which he had voluntarily taken on, but from his own fellow soldiers. After looking into the threats, the military agreed that his life was in danger of fragging, murder by fellow soldiers. So they stationed him in the U.S. for his own safety. But then he was passed over for a promotion and told that the reason for that denial was that if he would not pray with his troops, he could not be a good leader. Even stateside, the death threats continued against Hall. Jeremy Hall announced that he would be leaving the military in the spring of 2009. I have to assume that having applied for a promotion, this is a young man who might have made the military his career, but found that for an atheist, there just weren't any fair opportunities there. In a military desperate to recruit enough soldiers, drumming out those whose wrong belief systems are deemed wrong is not only constitutionally suspect, it's not practical. In another turn of events, Pentagon officials, high up in the Pentagon, one of whom was later assigned to be a liaison in Turkey, a secular nation which is majority Muslim, appeared in uniform in a fundraising video for the evangelical group Christian Embassy, a group which has become so powerful that the officials who appeared in the video thought it was a quasi-federal organization. And so they gave the group full access to the Pentagon as well, against every rule in the book. The perception that the U.S. military is on a Christian crusade creates intense danger for all of the troops overseas. And in fact, that liaison to Turkey, his first day there, he got into a taxi cab and the driver said, "Oh, you're the one from that video who's trying to convert everyone into Christians." And this is the one who's going to be the liaison. The Secular Coalition for America held a press conference on Veterans Day weekend 2008 to highlight the need for a policy which protects the freedom of religion, religious conscience, the freedom of conscience, freedom of belief of all military personnel. Working with the Military Religious Freedom Foundation and with the Secular Coalition member organization, Military Association of Atheists and Freethinkers, and with the volunteer assistance of a military lawyer, the Secular Coalition for America developed our proposed solution and sent it to President Obama that week. You can see the proposal on Secular Coalition for America's website, secular.org. The faith-based initiatives are another area that is tremendously complex but terribly flawed. When the Freedom from Religion Foundation, a member organization of the Secular Coalition for America, attempted to challenge the alleged unconstitutional activities conducted by the White House Office of Faith-Based Initiatives, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to address the violations, saying that taxpayers have no right to challenge expenditures made by the president or executive branch agencies, only expenditures made specifically in congressional budgets. This decision added immediacy to the coalition's ongoing efforts to convince Congress to deal with the faith-based initiative problems directly. Those problems include allegations that the secular social service providers are losing grants because some grant makers are giving 0 ratings to any grant applications which do not appear to be from Christian groups, that there is no oversight or accountability for how the religious groups are using the money and whether they are following the law regarding limiting the funds to non-proselytizing social service activities, and that these groups are assumed to have good results with no proof of such results merely because they are religious. Groups like Pat Robertson's Operation Blessing received your tax-funded federal grant money, and it did not have to comply with constitutional church-state standards, or at the very least, no one was checking to see if it met such standards. And the most frustrating piece of this puzzle is that the rhetoric claiming that faith-based groups were not already on a level playing field to apply for federal grants has convinced many Americans that the current religion privileging setup is just an attempt to make all groups equal. And even charitable choice language, which was added to some federal programs, such as the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Agency during the Clinton administration, under the Bush administration, that was being used to discriminate in employment based on religion. When charitable choice language was passed in the 1990s, a number of church-state separation groups warned of this and were told no one would ever interpret it that way. But the Bush White House website encouraged faith-based groups to take government money and refuse to hire those of other religious beliefs to carry out the federally funded services. Last year, the Secular Coalition for America joined with a number of allied groups and succeeded in keeping the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Agency language from being approved with charitable choice in it. It is currently awaiting further work before reauthorization. This is a huge success in that some members of the committee, and especially Senator Kennedy himself, wanted to push it out as is. And it is the first program containing charitable choice language to come up for reauthorization. So adding civil rights protection will be an important precedent as other programs come due to be reauthorized. The Secular Coalition for America opposes reauthorization of the federal religious school voucher program. The Senate Appropriations Committee extended what was supposed to be a 5-year experiment ending this year. They extended it for an additional year. But in 2009, Congress will decide whether to reauthorize it for the long haul. Under this voucher scheme, entitled Opportunity Scholarship Program, sounds nice, parents of children in D.C. whose household income is up to 300% of the poverty line receive federal funds of up to $7,500 per child to send their child to a participating non-public school. Nearly all of the participating schools are religious schools, leading the Government Accountability Office, in a study they did, to conclude that the program does not give parents sufficient secular choices. The GAO further concluded that public schools in D.C. have greater choice via their magnet and charter programs. Amazingly, the D.C. program does not even include protections which some state voucher programs have, such as the right of participating students to opt out of religious services and prohibition against religious discrimination in admissions for participating schools.